often say that the griot is urgent, and you are one of the most important griots of our time. And I have to tell you first that we really appreciate all of the work that you do.
Thank you.
You opened the documentary standing in this very space
I
at
did
Michigan
indeed.
Central Station, talking about how Black Southerners became Black Northerners, coming for hope, on a leap of faith, coming as resistance. Can you talk a little bit about the symbolism of this station and what it meant for Black people coming specifically to the city of Detroit?
Well, historians have said that Detroit was ground zero for the Great Migration.
Yeah.
Between 1910 and 1930, the Black population of Detroit increased 1,900%.
Yeah.
1,900%. And why? Because of the lure of the automobile industry.
Yeah.
Because of, give me 5 Henry Ford, $5 a day. And how did they get into Detroit?
Yeah.
By and large, through the beautiful Michigan Central Station.
Yeah, yeah.
So we opened the series here, and it felt, well, one, it was cold because it hadn't officially been.
You had on a top coat.
That's right. We had that, my producers worked with my tailor to design that top coat so it looked in period.
Yeah.
So that it looked like maybe a person coming through here in the winter of 1920 or 1930.
Yeah.
But I could feel the ancestors in here, but I could also feel a lot of shivering cold, man, because it was freezing. And this is the first time I've been back since it was open.
Yeah.
And it's just magnificent. And can you imagine what it was like to be a sharecropper from Mississippi or Alabama?
Well, that's where my maternal great-grandparents migrated from the Delta of Mississippi in Sharkey County.
Well, can you imagine leaving those conditions,
Yeah.
which were like neo-slavery,
Yeah.
getting enough money, riding on the trains, and finally walking in this hall? And I bet they almost fell out. They said, I ain't in Alabama no more. You know?
And then they said
this
they
was
weren't going back.
But this was the future. They went from the Middle Ages into modernity by getting on that train. And though between 1910 and 1970, 6 million African Americans left the South and came north and west, more stayed in the South. There never was a majority of Black people in the North. In 1910, 90% of all Black people lived in the South, in the former Confederacy.
Yeah.
And that never became a majority in the North, even by 1970. But because of the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, and the affordability of air conditioning.
Yeah.
And I tell my students that they crack up because they never think about that. It was too hot to live in the South, man.
Too hot.
But air conditioning, once you've been in the North and it was cool, you were not going to move back to the South until air conditioning came on. And of course, a lot of industrial jobs in the North moved to the South, and our people started
Going back. The reverse migration piece.
Yeah, the reverse
But, you know, one
migration.
of the things that...
And the third migration.
And the third migration.
And remember, we call it the Great Migrations, because the third migration is the migration of Africans and people from the Caribbean willingly to the United States. In the 10-year period between 1990 and the year 2000, more Africans migrated willingly to the United States than came over the entire course of the slave trade.
Wow. Wow, that is insane.
Isn't that insane?
It is.
You ever wonder why you see all those unpronounceable names on the football field and the basketball court, and the announcers saying, they crack me up. It's because they're the children of Africans who came in the third Great Migration.
That's so fascinating. You know, one of the things that the documentary also amplified is the struggle for civil rights when Black folks migrated to the North. It looked different. Black folks were relegated to certain neighborhoods because of spatial racism and racial restrictive covenants. Talk a little bit about that up against the nexus of political power that also created, right?
Yes. I mean, it was, as you say, an ironic after effect of segregation. And what do I talking about? Well, the last Reconstruction congressman was George Henry White.
Yeah.
And he's 1901, he's from North Carolina, and Reconstruction is finally totally rolled back. And he gives this great speech, and he says, I might be leaving, but the Negro will rise again like a phoenix, you know, from the ashes of the South. It's beautiful, man. And then he hightailed it on back down to North Carolina. So you know that there wasn't going to be a Black congressman elected from the Jim Crow South because they had disenfranchised all these black people from voting. Only black men could vote initially, of course.
Yeah.
So, when the Great Migration starts after 1910, they come to Detroit, they come to Chicago, they come to New York. Enough concentrated in one district in Chicago to be an electoral district,
Yeah.
so that they were able to elect Oscar DePriest
Yeah.
into Congress. He was the first black congressman since George Henry White said the Negro will rise again like a phoenix from the ashes. But he had no idea it would be in the North. He thought it would be somewhere in the Deep South, but it wasn't. The Deep South moved to the North.
Yeah.
And we are a people on the move. The moral of the story for Americans, and particularly black Americans, is that as soon as we could, we became a people on the move. What's America associated with? Movement, migration,
yeah.
nation of immigrants, right? We are the unwilling immigrants.
Yes.
We were dragged here in chains, right?
Yes.
But the movement of 12.5 million Africans across the Atlantic between the 16th century and the 19th century is the largest mass migration in world history. Now, only about 400,000 of those Africans came to the United States, but when we came here, we couldn't move. You
Yeah.
know, movement was denied us, the freedom of movement, agency. And as soon as our people could, now it took 45 years
Yeah.
after the end of the Civil War,
Yeah.
because what they did, they said you're free. They said the Civil War is over, but it was a trick.
It was.
Just sign this paper boy with your little X, and you were in a sharecropping, peonage, another form of slavery. We call it neo-slavery.
Yeah.
One historian called it slavery by another name. But as soon as our people figured out how to get up from under, as we say, the burden of neo-slavery, they headed north.
We have a little under 3 minutes left, and I want to get to this question. And it's something that Isabel Wilkerson touched on in the warmth of other
yeah, it was
sons
fabulous.
about children of migrants to the North having a childhood that was free of Jim Crow and were able to be children. Why was that important to talk about in the doc?
Well, first of all, just imagine what it would be like without the freedom to run up and down the street and play jump rope and hopscotch and hide and seek without worrying about some racist doing something horrible to you or to your child. Just put that in your head, right? We tend to forget how bad it was in the South, how horrible it was, how horrendous it was. So you had freedom of movement.
Freedom of movement.
Freedom of movement.
That's so good.
Whether it's moving from Georgia to Detroit or down the street to see Aunt Mary and back.
Yeah.
You know, down to get some fried chicken after
Yeah.
church. The second thing, the schools, one of the most heinous forms of Jim Crow was denying our people equal access to schools.
Yes.
So did they have schools? Yes, but the schools were horrible, underfunded, overcrowded. Here, though the schools were segregated in many places in the North, of course,
They got a solid education.
they were 10,000 times better
A
than.
solid education.
Yeah.
It's never enough time with you, Dr. Gates. Thank you so much for sitting down.
Oh, thank
with us.
you.